Hello F1 fans and welcome to another 5 Red Lights video. My name is Aaron and today I share my top 3 performers from the Eifel Grand Prix. Before I reveal my top 3 drivers from the weekend at the Nürburgring, please take a moment to click the like and subscribe buttons. You can be the fastest to see the latest videos from this channel and get in amongst the action in the comments section. Let's dive into my top 3 performers then. Okay, number 3, third place, I'm going to go for Charles Leclair. Charles' star is growing more this season than it did even last year, and it continued again this weekend at the Nürburgring. His qualifying lap was absolutely outstanding. It was only really overshadowed for me by Valtteri Bottas's effort for pole, considering that Bottas had a 3/4 of a second swing against his teammate from half a second behind to 1/4 of a second in front. Charles consistently ahead of Sebastian, pretty much demolishing him on Saturdays, and he really put that car in a place where it shouldn't be. It's such a shame that the Ferrari is so underpowered and lacking the aerodynamic performance of a Red Bull or a Mercedes, because watching Charles Leclerc versus Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen has the potential to be so exciting, so thrilling, and so explosive, all in equal measure. Now, in the race, having started P4 with his brilliant lap in qualifying, Charles, he actually made a good start. Looked like he was going to dive down the inside of Max into turn 1, but held his position in the end and fended off Albon and Ricciardo. Ricciardo then slotting into P5. And he did become a little bit of a mobile chicane, if I'm honest. Not that anyone was really getting past him, but his pace was just a little bit slow, and he really did hold those guys up behind him. It got to the point where he was 10 seconds off of the lead, I think, after sort of 5 or 6 laps, which was okay. The Ferrari isn't where it was last year, but that's still quite a lot of time to be losing. And he defended really well from Ricciardo, who was the faster car. You could see it. It was so clear. And initially, it was a really good defense, despite a bit of a lock-up at the end of the main straight into turn 1. But in the end, Daniel did have too much for him, and he did lose the place. But he soldiered on. He struggled a lot with the front graining. I think that was the main reason for his lack of pace. The Ferrari did grain its front tyres a lot more than everybody else. Forced into the two-stop strategy, so they kind of committed to that early and helped out with the late safety car. Didn't quite hang on to the 6th place that he was in at the restart. He was still in the mediums. And P7 at the end was a decent return given the car that he's got. And he's utterly outperforming a 4-time world champion in Sebastian Vettel. He put the car way above where it should have been in qualifying, and probably by the end of the race finished further ahead than he should really have done. And moving on to 2nd place, it's the guy who finished 3rd, the man with the biggest smile in the paddock, and the man who forgot to do a shoey on the podium. It's Daniel Ricciardo. Finally, it's here. Daniel Ricciardo has scored a podium with Renault. Another really well put together weekend for the Aussie, as you'd expect from him, and he thoroughly deserves this podium. All that work that the team have been putting in back at the Enstone factory over the last few months, it's finally paying dividends with a series of really strong results, not just for Daniel, but Esteban has scored some really nice results over the last few races too, even though he's had the lion's share of unreliability and just general bad luck. Daniel has had the misfortune in missing out on things, but still scooping up some really nice points. Daniel might well be regretting his decision to jump to McLaren next season, but for now he's going to be relishing driving that RS20. He transformed his race by making that pass on Leclair, sized him up for a few corners. I really liked David Coulthard's bit of commentary on the Channel 4 highlights where he goes, "I'm still here, I'm yellow." Everyone knows that it's yellow. We can't miss it. But in the end, the safety car really came to his aid, because having pitted early under the virtual safety car, Sergio Perez went a bit longer. It would have been interesting to see how that played out, because I don't think Perez was actually closing enough to begin with before the full safety car was deployed for Norris's McLaren on the side of the road. How well did Daniel manage his tyres? We don't know. We'll probably never know. So in the end, he did a great job holding on at the restart, because he could have quite easily have got that wrong. He had a buffer, then all of a sudden he didn't. And then it was comfortable. He kept Perez behind him without challenge, and he reached the podium. Now then, my number one performer for the Eifel Grand Prix is a man who wasn't even in the Eifel Grand Prix on Friday evening. It's Nico Hulkenberg. The Hulk parachuted in at the latest possible minute while FP3 was still running. It was the only practice session they even got, and he still managed to miss it. But he did a fine job. To only turn 4 laps in Q1 after having not driven the car for 2 months, which has been updated, and he last drove it in Silverstone when he subbed for Sergio Perez, and he only ended up 4.5 tenths off of a Q2 place, which, bearing in mind everyone else had an hour earlier on to get prepared and had been racing for the last few weeks, every weekend or every other weekend, was really not too shabby at all. And he did admit that he'd made a mistake with the settings at the start, but he quickly recognized and rectified this error before making his way through the field. And I think that shows great intellect. And we've seen it before where drivers they make a wrong switch setting at the start and they don't rectify it until halfway around the lap or halfway through sector 1, by which time their real opportunity has gone. But Nico, he made that switch just before turn 1, I think. He adjusted it and then he pounced and he made up a few places on lap 1. Generally, his pace was solid, and it didn't show that he'd been in and out of the car over this season. P8 at the end, so not the most glorious result, but if you think of the context, it's a brilliant result. He could quite easily have ended up in 13th or 14th and just said, "Oh well, I haven't driven the car for ages and it's all different, and I didn't have any practice time." So to come away with some points, the points that actually put Racing Point third in the championship, because Perez's 4th place brought them level with McLaren, because Sainz finished in 5th place, and Hulkenberg's 4 points for 8th place brought them up into 3rd, which I don't think that team has been that high in the championship since they were actually Jordan. So just trying to think back, don't think they got to 3rd place as Force India. No. But brilliant result for Hulkenberg, given he was having a coffee in Cologne at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning. Would Lance have fared much better? I don't think so, considering he definitely qualified higher, but whether he would have finished any further up is another question. He might have finished a couple of places ahead, maybe just behind Sergio Perez. But what could Nico have done with an FP3 session under his belt before qualifying? He could have been right up there, perhaps mixing it for the podium. But here's a question that I'm going to leave you on, and this is what I want you to answer in the comments. Given Alex Albon's struggles through much of this season, should the Hulk be sitting in a Red Bull in 2021? Answer me that in the comments section down below, and let's have some fun debating that. So that is my top 3 performers for the Eifel Grand Prix. We have 2 weeks until the Portuguese Grand Prix, which hasn't been on the calendar since the late 90s. I'm really looking forward to it. So that's the end of this video. I will see you in the next one. And until then, stay racy, everyone. And I'll see you after the Portuguese Grand Prix.